Okay, let's dive right into a real data mystery. We're looking at the Indian state of Meghalaya, where two official sources are telling two completely different stories about child malnutrition. So how can the same problem have two sets of numbers that are just worlds apart? Let's get into it. All right, first up, look at this number, 46.5%. According to one of India's biggest, most trusted surveys, a staggering 46.5% of young children in Meghalaya are stunted. We're talking about nearly 1 in every 2 kids. That is a truly alarming figure. But then you see this. A totally different official source, the government's own Poshan Tracker, says the number is actually 20.73%. That's less than half of the other figure. What is going on here? And this chart just lays it all out, plain and simple. Just look at that gap. This isn't a tiny discrepancy or some rounding error. It is a massive chasm between two official data points on the very same issue. So that brings us right to the heart of our question for today. How can both of these numbers be official? How can they both claim to be true? Well, the answer tells us a whole lot about how data gets collected and, more importantly, how it gets presented. Okay, so let's start by digging into that more optimistic number. This is the official success story, the one that comes from the Poshan Tracker data. And listen, this wasn't just some number buried in a report. It was actually presented in Parliament as solid evidence of progress. The data was used to make the case that Meghalaya was doing better than most of its neighbors in Northeast India. And it wasn't just stunting either. The data from June 2025 painted a really bright picture across the board. The numbers for wasting and underweight children were also incredibly low. This we'll call the good news dataset. So, what was the reason for this amazing turnaround? Well, officials pointed to the economic empowerment of women through things like local self-help groups. It sounds like a perfect success story, right? A clear cause and effect. But is it? Now, let's flip the coin and look at the other data set, the one that tells a completely different and, frankly, a much more worrying story. This is the data from the National Family Health Survey, or NFHS. And this right here, this slide just puts the contradiction in stark relief. I mean, look at them side by side. The numbers are just jarring. Stunting is more than double. Wasting is over 10 times higher in the NFHS survey. And the number of underweight kids, 5 times greater. These aren't just different numbers. They're describing two completely different realities. Let's just zero in on this stunting numbers for a second. The difference isn't a few percentage points. It is a massive 25.7 percentage points. Think about that. The gap alone is bigger than the entire stunting rate that the Poshan Tracker is reporting. So we've got a paradox on our hands. Two official sources, two wildly different conclusions. How do we solve it? Well, the answer isn't in the numbers themselves. It's all about how those numbers were gathered in the first place. Okay, here it is. This is the key. The NFHS is a massive survey that goes door to door to all kinds of households, rich and poor, in cities and in remote villages. The Poshan Tracker, on the other hand, gets its data from kids who are brought into government health centers. And that, right there, changes absolutely everything. We can really break this whole mystery down into 3 key factors. First, who is being counted? Second, how they're being measured. And third, the time lag between the two surveys. So let's talk about that first one, because it is the absolute game changer. Who gets counted? See, the Poshan Tracker is only counting kids who physically make it to a health center. And those families are, almost by definition, more likely to have the resources, the awareness, and the access to get there. But the NFHS? It goes to every household. It finds the families in the most remote villages, the ones who can't get to a health center, and that's often where malnutrition is at its worst. You know, one analysis put it perfectly. It said the so-called improvement might not be in the nutrition of children at all. It might just be in which children we're choosing to count. And that really highlights the danger here, mistaking selective data for genuine progress. Now, what about the time lag? The NFHS data is a few years older than the Poshan data. So could things really have improved that much? Well, let's be clear. To slash a stunting rate by more than half in just 4 years, that would be a global public health miracle. It's the kind of thing countries study for decades. It's not impossible, but you'd expect to see a massive, well-documented reason for it. So, where does all this leave us? Well, this data divide isn't just an academic exercise. It creates two completely different versions of reality for the people living in the state. On one hand, you have the Meghalaya from the official reports, a genuine success story of progress and empowerment, with stunting at just over 20%. But on the other hand, you have the Meghalaya from the Comprehensive Survey, a state facing a severe public health crisis, with a stunting rate of 46.5%, one of the highest in the country. And that leads to the most important question of all, doesn't it? Which of these two Meghalayas do the children there actually live in? Is it the one that looks great in a government report? Or is it the one you find when you go door to door? You know, there's a name for what we've been looking at. It's called statistical cherry picking. It's when you highlight the data that confirms the story you want to tell, while conveniently ignoring other data that might contradict it. In this case, it's celebrating the good news from health centers, while a much bigger survey is sounding the alarm. And really, that's the big takeaway here. Data isn't just data. How you measure a problem, who you decide to include, the methods you use, can completely, fundamentally change the story you end up telling. It's why we always have to ask, where did these numbers come from? Because at the end of the day, that's the difference between a real achievement that helps people and one that just looks good on a spreadsheet. Which leaves us with one final, lingering question. Is this dramatic drop in malnutrition in Meghalaya a public health miracle that we should all be learning from? Or is it a statistical artifact, something created simply by the way we choose to count? That is the Meghalaya paradox.